Hi, this is Calli Cromwell, and these are my first semester projects for advanced drafting. So my first project for the semester was a filament clip, and I did not do this project alone. I worked with a partner, Trent, and we had figured out that there was a problem changing out the filament for the 3D printers. Because there are no clips to hold anything down, the filament unspools because it's hard plastic, like you can see in the video. So to solve this problem, we had decided to create a type of clip to hold everything together so it doesn't unspool. So we started out with some pretty basic sketches just to come up with a few different ideas, such as these. Once we solidified an idea, we started to create dimensions and figure out exactly how big or how small each piece needed to be. After figuring out what exactly it is we wanted to do, I went into AutoCAD and drafted everything out and added dimensions to everything. Now this is also our initial dimensions, so these were all later changed, but this gave us a basis for the laser cutter and 3D printer. So first we started with the laser cutter. And we had a lot of problems with this at first. So initially we had dropped the drawing file into Adobe Illustrator to try to convert it into pixels and then send it to the laser cutter, which didn't work. Converting all the dimensions into pixels was a long, grueling process, and it became way too problematic, and we had some scaling issues as well. So we did some research and found that we can use AutoCAD and print or laser cut directly from AutoCAD. And so we set it up and created a laser cutting layer and then sent it into job control to prepare the laser cutter and then eventually ran the cutter. And so we did have some initial scaling issues at first. So we had printed multiple pieces, and finally we got one that worked, but it took multiple trials. So from here, Trenton went into Inventor and created a 3D model that you can see here. And after that, we had sent everything into Cura to prepare for the 3D printer, and then it went off for 3D printing. So here you can see a close-up of the clip actually being printed. And this is the final piece. And you can see there are two separate holes. The first one at the top was made for the larger 3D printer because it has a smaller filament. And the bottom one is for our smaller Ultimaker 3D printers because they have a larger filament. And the smaller piece up here can fit this type of spool, and the larger piece at the bottom, which you can't see, was made for the bigger spool, which contains a smaller filament. So the next project that I did with Trenton was laser cut some Steelmen keychains for the open house. Now, we used Adobe Illustrator for this one because there was already a pre-made file. All we had to do was throw it into job control and print it. So here's the two of us posing with our newly cut keychains. So my third project was creating an iron throne phone charging station. So my problem here was that I sleep with my phone in the bed with me, and I don't like to have it next to me while I'm sleeping. So I wanted to create something that I could stand my phone up on as well as charge it like throughout the night. And so I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, and I have always wanted to create one of the small-scale iron thrones, so I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to do so. I started by doing some research to find a picture of the iron throne, and then started to break it down into basic shapes on a piece of paper. After that, I had pulled out a B-size piece of paper and started to sketch it out at a 1:1 scale to figure out exactly how big it needed to be to fit my phone. After finishing my hand-drawn sketches, I redrew everything out in AutoCAD to make sure that everything would fit perfectly. After adding dimensions to everything and creating a drawing file, I went back and started to pick everything apart to prepare it to laser cut. First, I started laser cutting cardboard prototypes to make sure that everything would be just right before doing the final project. But I did have some more problems with the laser cutter. There turned out to be some scaling issues. Some of the pieces cut larger than what they were supposed to be in the file, and others had shrunk. So we needed to go back and find out what the problem was before we could move on. After all the pieces were cut out, I put everything together to make sure that everything would fit just right and the phone would fit. I did find a couple things that I didn't like. I thought that the back of the chair was too small and the armrests on the sides were too large. After a couple attempts, I finally got something right. The last picture here is everything put together, that it's all correct, no scaling problems or anything. So after that, I laser cut the plywood pieces, glued them all together with some wood glue, spray painted it, and then started to glue on all the cocktail swords that went on to imitate the Iron Throne. Here you can see the first prototype, the second prototype, and then the final product after all the swords have been glued on. To make sure that everything was perfect, I put my phone and Monica's example watch on there and fed the cord through the bottom, and everything looked fantastic. Here you can see the final project with my phone and Monica's example watch and the cord running through the base. My next project was fixing my WACOM INTUOS pen stand. So I have a drawing tablet at home that's very expensive, and it comes with a pen and a little stand that also is a nib container and nib remover. So on the inside, it contains all the extra nibs that go on the tip of the pen. And then on the bottom, it has this little nib remover that you can stick the nib in, pull the pen back, and it comes out nice and easy. You can also stand the pen upright or lay it sideways like it's shown in the picture. But this isn't very effective. Whenever I bump my desk, my pen falls out. So I decided that I would replace it with something better. I spent a lot of time researching and trying to find different ideas that I could use to create a different stand. So I finally found something basic that wasn't too complex, but also very practical, and I tried making a cardboard prototype out of it. Once I figured out that that would work for the most part, I made a foam prototype, as you can see in the following pictures. I had two different pieces, glued them together, and then cut out a hole in the bottom to make a drawer to hold the nib container, and then also cut out a depression in the bottom to keep that bottom piece that's on the original pen stand. After finishing the foam prototype, I stuck the pen in there just to see how well it would work, and I was pretty happy with what I had come up with. Next, I went into Inventor and created a 3D model. Now, this 3D model allowed me to figure out exactly how I wanted everything to fit together. So I made a little drawer and a stand, and I'm able to slide the drawer right inside the cavity there, and then I also created a little divot in the bottom to keep the original base stand. After finishing the model, I went back into Inventor and I started to create a drawing file. So I started with the title page, and then I moved on to the assembly and exploded assembly with all of a parts list on the bottom, which only consisted of 2 parts. I then went even further and I made a particular file or drawing file for the base itself, so you can see where the depression is, how deep the hole goes to the pen, where the drawer cavity is, and then after that I dimensioned the drawer itself. At this point, I started to have a little bit of problems. I dragged the Inventor model into Cura and got it set up for the 3D printer, but I didn't print the entire model. I only printed half of the base and then the entire drawer to make sure that everything fit properly. The pieces didn't quite fit together, and so I needed to go back into the file and make changes before printing it for real. After I made little tweaks and changes, I set everything up in Cura, plugged it in a 3D printer, and I let it print. So here you can see the model is nearing the end of its printing process. You can see that the drawer had been fully completed. And then here you can see everything put together with the pen and the drawer in the base. So at this point, I plan to hand model something to hold up the pen here, just to make it a little bit sturdier. But now, if I shake the table, the pen will not come out. And in the bottom is actually the original metal piece on the base, the nib remover. My final project for the semester was creating a 3D print demo for the Steelmen showcase. My plan was to do a keychain, but the keychain ended up being too big. So, as a result, I started to create a small Steelmen to 3D print instead. As you can see here, here's the front view of a Steelmen, and this is what it looked like after they were 3D printed. I later turned the small Steelmen into an ornament to hang on the tree in a room. I took it into Cura, scaled it up a little bit, and added a ring at the top. And after the 3D print was complete, I took it out of the 3D printer and hung it on the tree. This project and all the others before it taught me a lot about the engineering process. I plan to major in mechanical engineering in college and become an engineer officer in the United States Navy or Army. The problem-solving skills I learn now will certainly help me achieve these goals later and help me become the best leader and engineer that I can be.